If you're anything like us, your chest swells with pride when someone says American manufacturing or made in the USA. Unfortunately, it's a conflicting moment now and then. In the last 120 years of manufacturing, the peak decades were in the 1910s and the 1950s, in which 25 to 35% of our economy was manufacturing. And unfortunately, coming in at a whopping 11.3%, this is the weakest our economy has ever been, which is less than half of the peak decades that came before. But if you notice, the peaks coincided with wars, World War I and the Korean War. A notable tough time for manufacturing was in the 1930s, which included the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. We probably don't want to go back to those years if the bad comes with the good. If we're proud of the legacy of American manufacturing and we see it as a patriotic duty, then why not make at least that part of our American experience how it used to be? A lot has changed for the better during the perceived decline of manufacturing in the US, and it would be foolhardy and unpatriotic to ignore that reality. According to the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, manufacturing has consistently been a massively important industry in the United States. In the first decade of the 20th century, manufacturing contributed an average of $24.4 billion in real terms to US GDP. This grew exponentially over the next decades, with an average growth rate of 5.2% per decade. In 1960, manufacturing accounted for an average of $388.6 billion of US GDP. By 2018, the industry's real terms contribution had grown to an average of $2.05 trillion, representing 11% of US GDP. And that's it. That's part of where we derive our pride. We represent more than $2 trillion US dollars of GDP. That's nothing to sneeze at. It's also 6 times what we used to represent back in 1960. So even though our percent share of GDP has fallen, we know that GDP has risen consistently, with some recession exceptions on our shared American timeline, for 120 years. We're consistently growing. So why the long face, says the bartender to the horse. Americans are competitive. We're football on Sundays, a friendly bet on a foot race, all-nighters to make sure we get the better grade, and a few clicks and smack talk away from being the best at Call of Duty Modern Warfare on Xbox. Collectively, we see our position as a world leader in all areas as tied to our collective well-being, our way of life. Yes, the US does have internal struggles, and things can get better for many of us on the home front. But in comparison to many other countries, even those Americans who have it the worst are better off than the best in many other countries. And to maintain that station and continually have the luxury to work on bettering that station for all of us, we compete. We're also smart enough to know when we're not winning the gold in the race. We know that China, India, all of Asia is outworking us in manufacturing. Likewise, we also know that wages are low there, which is a gross understatement in the worst cases. It is incumbent upon us to find a way to continually innovate, automate, and make domestic manufacturing more attractive to businesses here and abroad, so they'll send their work here too. It is also a rightly self-imposed requirement that we continue to focus on safety, honorable work conditions, and fair pay. Pride is a funny thing. The good book says, "Pride cometh before a fall." How dare we be proud then? Thanks to the English language, that word has nuanced layers. Haughty pride, that type of pride that is tied to overconfidence and an unteachable spirit, is dangerous. We don't think that this is the American pride, especially not made in the USA pride. Instead, pride in American manufacturing is knowing that the work we turn out is good. Our collective work is disciplined. It's skilled and honed to as perfect as human work will allow. It's open to observation and best practices to find flaws and carefully, kindly address them for the betterment of not only one product or process, but a learning that can be more globally applied. We are proud to have a can-do attitude that is tied to knowing that trying is winning and failing, the way Edison did so many times before the light bulb worked. We know that we can do it. Not only that, but with perseverance and a commitment to our shared values, rise to new heights as American manufacturers.